Dr. Maya Rodriguez stared at her computer screen and wondered, not for the first time, why she'd ever thought xenolinguistics would be a peaceful career. The alien transmission playing through her headphones sounded like someone gargling gravel while slowly dying of tuberculosis. She'd been listening to variations of this delightful symphony for 3 weeks now, and her translation progress could be generously described as pathetic. A computer, replay segment 47, she muttered, reaching for her fourth coffee of the morning. It was barely 9 a.m. The bridge of the diplomatic vessel Unity's promise hummed around her with the kind of sterile efficiency that made Maya miss her chaotic university office. At least there, when she wanted to bang her head against something, she had a choice of surfaces. Here, everything was smooth, white, and designed by people who clearly believed that making things look important was more important than making them functional. Captain Williams approached her workstation with the expression of a man trying very hard not to panic. "Any progress, Doctor?" Maya gestured at her screen, which displayed a colorful mess of waveforms and failed translation attempts. "Well, I've determined that they're definitely trying to communicate. Beyond that, your guess is as good as mine. They could be reciting poetry, declaring war, or reading their grocery list. The tonal variations suggest complex grammar, but the syntax is completely alien. That's why they're aliens, Doctor." "Thanks for that insight, Captain. Really helpful." Maya pulled off her headphones and rubbed her temples. "Look, the Galactic Council of Zephyrians invited us to this little cosmic tea party, right? They want humanity to join their prestigious alliance of advanced civilizations. All we have to do is pass their cultural compatibility assessment, which sounds about as ominous as it feels." The captain nodded grimly. "And you're our key to proving we're civilized enough to join the galactic community." "No pressure at all." Maya turned back to her screen. "The problem is, everything I know about xenolinguistics comes from theory and simulation. Nobody exactly prepared me for first contact with beings whose language sounds like a cement mixer having an existential crisis." She pulled up the official briefing documents on her secondary monitor. The Zephyrians had been surprisingly forthcoming about the assessment process. Every species wanting to join their alliance had to demonstrate cultural compatibility, peaceful intentions, and what they diplomatically termed cognitive sophistication. Humanity had apparently passed the first 2 criteria, based on our initial radio transmissions and mathematical proofs. The third criterion required direct communication. "The good news," Maya continued, "is that they're coming to us. Their diplomatic vessel should arrive within the hour. The bad news is that I still can't tell the difference between their word for greeting and their word for prepare to die horribly." Captain Williams looked like he wanted to say something reassuring but couldn't think of anything that wouldn't be an obvious lie. "I have faith in you, Doctor. You're the best xenolinguist Earth has." "I'm the only xenolinguist Earth has." "Yeah. Mum. There's a difference." Maya saved her work and stood up, stretching muscles that had been hunched over computers for too long. "But hey, what's the worst that could happen? I misinterpret something, accidentally declare war on half the galaxy, and become the reason humanity gets blacklisted from interstellar civilization before we even get started." The captain's face went slightly pale. "That was a joke, Captain. Mostly." Maya gathered her translation equipment and headed toward the docking bay. Time to make history. Or ruin it. Either way, it's going to be interesting. The Zephyrian diplomatic shuttle docked with Unity's promise exactly on schedule, which Maya found oddly reassuring. At least they were punctual. That had to count for something in the cosmic scheme of things. What she hadn't expected was for them to look like 6-foot-tall praying mantises wearing what could only be described as business suits. The lead alien stepped through the airlock with the confident stride of someone who owned the galaxy and was considering evicting humanity from it. "I am Ambassador Clixtar of the Zephyrian Diplomatic Corps," he announced in a voice that sounded like aggressive clicking mixed with elevator music. "We greet you in the spirit of potential cooperation and mutual understanding." Maya blinked. She'd actually understood that. Her translation software was working better than expected, which meant the real challenge would be going the other direction. "Welcome aboard, Ambassador," Captain Williams said formally. "This is Dr. Maya Rodriguez, our chief xenolinguist. Maya stepped forward and attempted what she hoped was a diplomatic smile. Ambassador Klix-Tar, it's an honor to meet you. I look forward to facilitating communication between our species. She activated her translation matrix and spoke carefully into her headset. What came out of the speakers was a series of clicks, whistles, and what sounded suspiciously like a garbage disposal eating a kazoo. Ambassador Klix-Tar's compound eyes widened in what Maya hoped was surprise rather than horror. The other Zephyrians began clicking rapidly among themselves. Fascinating, Klix-Tar finally replied. Your species reproduces through ritual combat, and you consume your offspring for nutritional purposes during the breeding season. Maya felt her stomach drop into her shoes. I'm sorry, what? You stated that humans engage in reproductive warfare and practice infantile cannibalism. This is most unusual among sentient species. She quickly checked her translation matrix, trying to figure out where everything had gone so spectacularly wrong. The problem became apparent almost immediately. The Zephyrian language used tonal modulations that her equipment was interpreting as semantic markers. Her polite greeting had somehow become a detailed description of humanity's most barbaric fictional practices. No, that's completely wrong, Maya said, frantically adjusting her settings. Humans don't fight to reproduce. We actually have quite romantic courtship rituals involving flowers and dinner dates and, trying not to embarrass ourselves too badly. The translation came out sounding like a detailed military strategy. Ambassador Klix-Tar's mandibles clicked ominously. You employ botanical warfare and consumption rituals as psychological intimidation tactics. Your species' approach to mating displays is remarkably aggressive. This is going great, Maya muttered under her breath. Out loud, she tried again. Perhaps we could start with something simpler. In human culture, we have something called small talk. It's casual conversation meant to establish friendly social connections. The translation matrix rendered this as what sounded like a declaration of psychological warfare. Ah, said Klix-Tar, now taking notes on what appeared to be a holographic tablet. You utilize conversational manipulation to establish dominance hierarchies. And this concept of personal space you mentioned in your initial greeting, this refers to territorial aggression patterns. Maya looked desperately at Captain Williams, who appeared to be having some sort of minor stroke. Ambassador, I think there may be some technical difficulties with our translation equipment. What I'm trying to say is that humans are actually quite peaceful. We value cooperation, friendship, and mutual respect. The clicks and whistles that emerged from her translator sounded like a battle cry, followed by what could only be described as threats against someone's extended family. The Zephyrians began backing away slowly. Dr. Rodriguez, Ambassador Klix-Tar said carefully, "Are you declaring your intention to conquer our homeworld and enslave our young?" I really need to recalibrate this thing, Maya said, now frantically typing commands into her equipment. Captain, maybe we should take a brief recess while I figure out why my translator thinks everything I say is a war crime. 2 hours later, Maya had convinced herself that she'd fixed the translation matrix. She'd run 17 diagnostic tests, consulted every xenolinguistic protocol in her database, and sacrificed a perfectly good pen to the gods of functional technology. The Zephyrians had agreed to reconvene for what Maya optimistically called a cultural exchange dinner. She should have known better. So, Maya said, attempting to salvage first contact with the power of human hospitality, this is what we call a friendly meal. Humans often eat together to build social bonds and share experiences. Ambassador Klix-Tar and his delegation examined the spread of Earth foods with the cautious interest of bomb disposal experts. You consume organic matter in group settings to establish pack hierarchy. Not hierarchy, friendship. See, when humans enjoy something, we laugh. Maya demonstrated with what she hoped was a warm, welcoming chuckle. The effect on the Zephyrians was immediate and dramatic. They began clicking frantically, their antennae twitching in what Maya was beginning to recognize as extreme agitation. Dr. Rodriguez, Klix-Tar said slowly, was that a mating call? What? No, laughter is how humans express joy, amusement, happiness. It's a positive social behavior. Maya tried laughing again, softer this time. The Zephyrians huddled together, clearly discussing whether they needed to call for backup. Captain Williams, bless his diplomatic soul, attempted to help. Perhaps we could demonstrate a traditional human greeting. He extended his hand toward Ambassador Clickstar. This is called a handshake. It's a sign of friendship and mutual respect. Clickstar stared at the offered hand, as if it might explode. You wish to engage in a dominance display? To test my physical strength against yours? It's really just a friendly gesture, Maya said, though she was beginning to wonder if humans had any friendly gestures that wouldn't be misinterpreted as acts of war. She decided to try a different approach, education. Let me tell you about human history. We've had our conflicts, certainly, but we've also created beautiful art, magnificent architecture, and inspiring literature. We've overcome many of our violent tendencies through cooperation and understanding. Ambassador Clickstar was taking notes again, which Maya was beginning to realize was never a good sign. So your species has a documented history of organized warfare, territorial conquest, and systematic elimination of competing groups. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds much worse than... Maya trailed off as she realized that, objectively speaking, human history probably did sound pretty terrible to a species that had apparently evolved past the concept of conflict. And this literature you mentioned, Clickstar continued, these are historical records of your conquests. Fiction, mostly. Stories we tell for entertainment. You create false narratives for recreational purposes. The ambassador's compound eyes seemed to focus on her with new intensity. Your species regularly engages in deliberate deception as a form of social activity. Maya felt the conversation spiraling away from her like a runaway spacecraft. Not deception exactly. More like imagination, creative expression. And sometimes we tell small lies to be polite, like when someone asks how we're doing and we say fine, even if we're having a terrible day. The scratching of Clickstar's stylus on his tablet grew more furious. Fascinating. Deception is so integral to your social structure that you employ it as a courtesy mechanism. You have weaponized dishonesty and transformed it into a politeness protocol. That's not what I meant at all. Dr. Rodriguez, Clickstar said, setting down his tablet with the air of someone reaching a significant conclusion. I believe we have learned enough about human culture for today. My delegation will need time to process this information and prepare our report for the Galactic Council. As the Zephyrians filed out of the dining area, Maya heard one of them clicking something that her translator helpfully rendered as Alert Level Orange. Recommend immediate threat assessment protocols. Maya slumped into her chair and reached for the nearest bottle of wine. Captain, I think I may have just convinced our first alien contact that humanity is a species of lying, violent, deceptive monsters who use psychological warfare as a form of entertainment. Is that a bad thing? Captain Williams asked hopefully. Maya took a long drink and considered the question. That depends on whether they decide we're too dangerous to ignore or too dangerous to let live. Maya discovered the full extent of her diplomatic disaster the next morning when her computer cheerfully informed her that the Zephyrians had been broadcasting her translations to the entire Galactic Council as real-time documentation of humanity's cultural assessment. The computer, show me the transmission log, she said, though she already suspected she wasn't going to like what she found. The holographic display materialized above her desk, showing a neat timeline of outgoing communications. Every single one of her mistranslations had been packaged and distributed to 47 different alien civilizations as evidence of humanity's fundamental nature. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. She scrolled through the translated reports, watching her failures compound into an intergalactic incident. Her attempt to explain human recreational activities had been catalogued as evidence of organized gladiatorial combat systems. Her description of Hollywood movies was filed under historical documentation of conquest campaigns. And her casual mention that humans sometimes kill time when bored had apparently convinced the Council that humanity possessed temporal manipulation weapons. Maya's door chimed, and Captain Williams entered looking like a man who'd received some very bad news. Doctor, we've got a problem. The Galactic Council is demanding an emergency session. Apparently, 3 different species have filed formal complaints requesting that humanity be quarantined before we, and I quote, infect the galaxy with our aggressive pathology. Define quarantined. Permanently confined to our solar system under armed supervision. Maya stared at the transmission logs floating above her desk. Somewhere in the galaxy, dozens of alien civilizations were probably having nightmares about the barbaric humans who turned lying into an art form and commanded armies of time-destroying warriors. Captain, I need you to understand something. Everything I've told them about humanity is technically true. We do have a history of warfare. We do create fictional stories for entertainment. We do sometimes lie to be polite. The problem is that they're interpreting all of this through their own cultural framework, and apparently they come from a civilization that never developed concepts like competitive sports or imagination. So what do we do? Maya pulled up the latest council communication. The Zephyrians had submitted a formal threat assessment recommending that humanity be classified as a cognitive hazard species with weaponized social deception capabilities and documented temporal manipulation technology. Well, she said, we have 2 options. Option 1, I spend the next several days trying to explain human nuance to aliens who think laughter is a mating call and handshakes are dominance displays. Given my success rate so far, this will probably result in them deciding we're not just dangerous, but actively malevolent. What's option 2? Maya turned away from her computer and looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there was an entire galactic civilization that had apparently never experienced conflict, never told stories, and never learned that sometimes the most peaceful species could be the most dangerous when threatened. Option 2 is much more interesting, she said slowly. What if we stop trying to convince them we're harmless and start making sure they understand exactly how dangerous we actually are? Captain Williams looked alarmed. Doctor, I don't think threatening alien civilizations is the best way to. Not threatening, Captain. Demonstrating. Think about it. They're terrified of us because they think we're unpredictable warmongers, but they're also fascinated by us for exactly the same reason. What if our reputation for chaos and adaptability is actually our greatest diplomatic asset? She pulled up the cultural assessment requirements on her screen. Look at this. Every species that joins the Galactic Council has to demonstrate peaceful intentions, cognitive sophistication, and cultural compatibility. We've been trying to prove we meet their standards, but what if their standards aren't actually what they need? I'm not following. Maya grinned, and for the first time in days it felt genuine. Captain, when was the last time the Galactic Council faced a real crisis? When did they last have to deal with anything more challenging than diplomatic protocol disputes and trade negotiations? I have no idea. Exactly. They've created a perfect, peaceful, stable civilization, which means they've also created a civilization that has absolutely no idea what to do when something goes wrong. And sooner or later, something always goes wrong. The captain's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. You want to turn our apparent weaknesses into strengths. I want to show them that what they think is humanity's dangerous unpredictability is actually our ability to adapt, improvise, and solve problems they can't even imagine. We're not monsters, Captain. We're exactly what they need, even if they don't know it yet. Maya turned back to her computer and began composing a new message to the Galactic Council. Time to stop apologizing for being human and start explaining why that's exactly what the galaxy needs. Maya's new strategy required her to do something that went against every diplomatic instinct she'd ever developed. She started telling the truth in the most terrifying way possible. Ambassador Clickstar, she said during their next communication, I believe there have been some misunderstandings about human nature. Allow me to clarify. She activated her translation matrix, but this time she didn't try to soften anything. If the Zephyrians wanted to hear about humanity's dangerous capabilities, she'd give them exactly that. Humans are indeed a species forged by conflict. We have survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and countless wars. This has made us exceptionally skilled at rapid adaptation, creative problem-solving, and functioning under extreme pressure. We don't just survive chaos, Ambassador. We thrive in it. The translation came out sounding appropriately ominous. Clickstar's antennae twitched. Furthermore, Bisay, Maya continued, our fictional narratives serve a crucial evolutionary purpose. They allow us to mentally rehearse responses to scenarios we've never encountered. When humans read stories about alien invasions, zombie apocalypses, or interdimensional threats, we're not just entertaining ourselves, we're preparing for the impossible. She could see several Zephyrians taking frantic notes. Mare. And yes, we do possess what you might call temporal manipulation abilities. When humans are truly motivated, we can accomplish in hours what normally takes days, compress years of learning into months, and find solutions to problems that have never been solved before. We call this working under pressure, and it's one of our species' most remarkable capabilities. Ambassador Clickstar leaned forward. Dr. Rodriguez, are you attempting to intimidate the Galactic Council? Not at all, Ambassador. I'm explaining why humanity would be the most valuable member you could possibly recruit. Before Clickstar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the diplomatic station. Emergency lights bathed the conference room in red, and a mechanical voice announced, Alert. Hostile vessels detected. All personnel to emergency stations. Captain Williams burst into the room. Raider attack. 3 ships, unknown configuration. They're jamming our communications and moving to disable our engines. Maya watched the Zephyrians' reaction with interest. They looked around helplessly, their compound eyes wide with something she recognized as panic. These were beings who had evolved in a peaceful galaxy. They literally didn't know what to do when faced with actual violence. Ambassador, Maya said calmly, how long has it been since the Galactic Council dealt with hostile forces? There are protocols. The proper authorities should be notified. The communications are jammed, Ambassador. The proper authorities are us. Maya stood up and looked directly at Clickstar. This is what I'd been trying to explain. Humans don't just talk about handling crises, we actually handle them. She turned to Captain Williams. What's our tactical situation? 3 raider vessels, probably pirates looking for salvage. They've got us outgunned, but they're not expecting resistance from a diplomatic mission. Perfect. Maya grinned. Ambassador Clickstar, would you like to see humanity's so-called dangerous capabilities in action? Because I'm about to demonstrate why a species that evolved through constant conflict might be exactly what your peaceful galaxy needs. She activated the ship's internal communications. Attention all hands. This is Dr. Rodriguez. We have hostile forces attempting to board this vessel. I know you all signed up for a peaceful diplomatic mission, but sometimes diplomacy requires a more direct approach. All security teams to action stations. Engineering. I need everything you can give me from the engines, navigation. Plot us an intercept course with the smallest raider vessel. Ambassador Clickstar clicked frantically. Dr. Rodriguez, surely the appropriate response is to attempt negotiation with these hostile forces. Ambassador, these are pirates. They don't want to negotiate. They want to strip our ship for parts and sell our crew into slavery. The appropriate human response is to make sure they regret targeting us. Through the viewport, Maya could see the raider ships moving into attack formation. They were sleek, predatory-looking vessels that had clearly been designed for intimidation as much as combat. Captain Williams, she continued, what's the most creative solution you can think of for dealing with 3 ships that think they're hunting helpless diplomats? The captain's expression shifted from concern to something that might have been anticipation. Well, Doctor, if we're not bound by diplomatic protocols anymore, I have a few ideas that might surprise them. Maya turned back to the terrified Zephyrians. Ambassador, you're about to learn why humans don't just survive in a dangerous universe. We make it less dangerous for everyone else. 23 minutes later, the 3 raider ships were drifting helplessly in space with their engines disabled, their weapons systems fried, and their crews very politely requesting permission to surrender. Maya hadn't fired a single shot. How? Ambassador Clickstar asked, staring at the tactical display in what she was beginning to recognize as Zephyrian amazement. Simple, Maya explained. Captain Williams used our diplomatic transponder to broadcast a fake distress signal that made us look like a heavily armed military vessel disguised as a diplomatic mission. The raiders panicked and tried to flee, which is when we used our actual diplomatic status to hail them with a peaceful negotiation request. But they still attacked. Right, which is when we implemented what humans call psychological warfare. I got on the communications channel and started explaining, in great detail, exactly what would happen to pirates who attacked a vessel under Galactic Council protection. I may have implied that the Council's response to piracy involved some very creative punishments. Ambassador Clickstar's mandibles clicked slowly. But the Galactic Council has no enforcement protocols for dealing with hostile forces. The pirates didn't know that. They heard Galactic Council and creative punishments and decided that discretion was the better part of valor. By the time they realized we were bluffing, Captain Williams had used their moment of hesitation to disable their ships with a precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse. You defeated 3 armed vessels using deception, misdirection, and precise application of non-lethal force. We neutralized a threat using creative problem-solving, adaptive thinking, and the kind of improvisational skills that only develop in a species that spent millennia dealing with the unexpected. Maya smiled. In other words, Ambassador, we used exactly the capabilities that your threat assessment identified as dangerous. Captain Williams stepped forward. Dr. Rodriguez, we're receiving communications from the Galactic Council. Apparently they detected the pirate activity and are impressed with our response. Maya activated the communication channel. The holographic display filled with representatives from dozens of alien species, all looking at humanity with expressions she couldn't quite identify. Dr. Rodriguez came a synthesized voice that her translator identified as belonging to the Council's senior coordinator. We have reviewed the tactical logs from your encounter with hostile forces. Your species' response was both creative and effective. We are intrigued. Thank you, Coordinator. I hope this demonstrates that humanity's adaptive capabilities are an asset rather than a threat. Indeed. We have also reviewed Ambassador Clickstar's assessment of human cultural characteristics. Upon reflection, we believe our initial interpretation may have been overly cautious. Ambassador Clickstar stepped forward. Dr. Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. What we perceived as dangerous unpredictability is actually cognitive flexibility. Your species' history of conflict has not made you violent. It has made you resilient. And our tendency toward creative fiction, mental preparation for unprecedented scenarios, extremely practical. Our habit of polite deception, social optimization protocols, quite sophisticated actually. Maya felt a weight she'd been carrying for days finally lift from her shoulders. So humanity passes the cultural compatibility assessment. Dr. Rodriguez, the Council coordinator, said, humanity doesn't just pass the assessment. We would like to offer your species a special role within the Galactic Council. We believe you would be excellent crisis response coordinators. You want us to be the galaxy's problem solvers? The galaxy is a large and complicated place, Dr. Rodriguez. Things go wrong. When they do, we would very much like to have humans around to figure out what to do about it. Maya looked around the room at the assembled aliens, all of whom were now regarding humanity with something that looked remarkably like respect. Well, Ambassador Clickstar, I suppose this means I won't be known as the translator who accidentally declared war on the galaxy. Actually, Dr. Rodriguez, I believe you will be known throughout the Council as something far more impressive. Clickstar's compound eyes seemed to focus on her with what she was learning to recognize as Zephyrian approval. You will be known as the translator of terror, the human who convinced the galaxy that your species is too valuable to fear and too useful to ignore. Maya considered this for a moment. You know what, Ambassador? I think I can live with that title. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she was already looking forward to the next impossible problem that would require a uniquely human solution. After all, the galaxy was a big place, and someone had to keep it interesting.